My father Frank died on a Tuesday morning in March, and by Friday afternoon my older brother Blake was already redecorating Dad's office. I stood in the doorway of Hammond and Sons Manufacturing, watching him toss Dad's awards into a cardboard box like they were garage sale junk. "You can clean out your desk by Monday," Blake said without looking up. "I'm bringing in real management." I stared at him. I'd worked at Hammond and Sons for 12 years since I was 22, running operations, while Blake bounced between failed startups and expensive hobbies. "Blake, I manage the entire production floor. I know every client, every contract." "You're a glorified secretary," he cut me off, finally meeting my eyes. His wife Brooke stood beside him, arms crossed, smirking. "Dad left the business to me. That means I decide who stays and who goes. And honestly, Nina, you've been dead weight for years." The words hit like a slap. Dead weight. I'd worked 60-hour weeks while Blake played golf. I'd kept the factory running while he spent Dad's money on sports cars. "The will reading is Monday," I said quietly. "We'll see what Dad actually wanted." Blake laughed, the same cruel laugh he'd used since we were kids. "I already know what's in the will. Dad told me months ago. Hammond and Sons goes to me. The house goes to me. The investment accounts go to me. You get some sentimental junk and maybe a small cash payout." He walked around the desk and leaned against it, looking down at me. "Dad knew I was the one with vision. You're too cautious, too timid. This business needs someone who thinks big." Brooke nodded along like a trained seal. "Blake's already got plans to modernize everything," she said. "New equipment, new staff, new direction. It's going to be amazing." I looked around Dad's office one more time. The photos of our family at company picnics, the framed newspaper article about Hammond and Sons winning Regional Manufacturer of the Year, the coffee mug I'd given him that said, "World's Best Dad," all of it being erased. "I'll be at the will reading," I said again. "Monday, 10 a.m. Blake waved me off like I was a fly. "Sure, Nina. Come collect your participation trophy." I left the factory and drove straight to my mother's house. She was in the garden, trimming roses, wearing Dad's old work jacket. When she saw me pull up, she smiled, but I could see the grief in her eyes. "Blake kicked me out," I said, my voice breaking. "He's taking over Monday, and he wants me gone." Mom set down her shears and pulled off her gardening gloves. "Come inside, honey. We need to talk." We sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast for 18 years. Mom poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from me. "Your father and I talked a lot before he died," she said carefully. "About the business, about Blake, about you." I wiped my eyes. "Blake said Dad told him everything, that he's inheriting Hammond and Sons." "Did he?" Mom's expression was strange, not sad, almost amused. "Did your father tell Blake everything? Or did Blake assume?" Before I could answer, she stood and walked to the china cabinet in the corner. From the back of a drawer, she pulled out a small envelope. "Your father left this for you." Inside the envelope was a single brass key on a plain metal ring. No label, no note, nothing else. I turned it over in my hand, confused. "What does this open?" I asked. Mom sat back down, and now she was definitely smiling. "Your father was a careful man, Nina. He loved both his children, but he wasn't blind. He knew Blake's weaknesses, the gambling, the failed businesses, the way he treated people." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "He also knew your strengths, how you kept Hammond and Sons profitable through 2 recessions, how you negotiated the Westfield contract that saved 80 jobs, how you actually care about the people who work there." I looked at the key, feeling its weight. "Mom, what is this?" "Storage unit," she said simply. "Unit 42 at Lakeside Storage on Route 9. Your father rented it 5 years ago. He told me if anything happened to him, I should give you that key and tell you to go there before the will reading." My heart started beating faster. "What's in it?" Mom stood and kissed the top of my head. "Truth," she said. "Go find out." I drove to Lakeside Storage in a daze. The facility was 20 minutes outside town, a maze of orange metal buildings surrounded by chain-link fence. I found Unit 42 in the back row. The key slid into the padlock smoothly like it had been used recently. The lock clicked open. I lifted the rolling door and stepped inside. The unit was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, lit by a single bulb. Inside were 4 filing cabinets, 3 banker's boxes, and a desk with a laptop on it. Everything was organized, labeled, dated. I pulled open the first filing cabinet drawer. Inside were folders, each one marked with a year: 2019 financial discrepancies, 2020 unauthorized withdrawals, 2021 falsified reports. I pulled out the 2021 folder. Inside were bank statements, highlighted and annotated in Dad's handwriting, transfers from the business account to Blake's personal account. $50,000 here, $30,000 there. Over 2 years, Blake had taken nearly $400,000 from Hammond & Sons without authorization. The next folder was worse. Contracts Blake had signed without board approval. A loan he'd taken out against company assets. A failed side business he'd funded with company money, then hidden when it collapsed. I sat at the desk, hands shaking, and opened the laptop. It powered on immediately, no password needed. The desktop had a single folder labeled for Nina. Inside were video files, dozens of them, all dated and time-stamped. I clicked the most recent one, dated 2 weeks before Dad died. His face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his eyes were clear. "Nina," he said, his voice rough, "if you're watching this, I'm gone, and your mother gave you the key." "Good, that means everything went according to plan." He shifted in his chair and took a breath. "I've known about Blake's theft for 3 years. I documented everything. I also know what he thinks he's inheriting. The will he's seen, the one my lawyer Mr. Anderson showed him last month, that's not the real will. It's a test." My breath caught. "The real will is in safety deposit box 917 at First National Bank. Only Mr. Anderson has the second key. Blake will inherit Hammond & Sons on paper, but the business is worthless." Dad leaned closer to the camera. "I've been moving assets for 2 years. The factory? Mortgaged to the limit to cover Blake's theft and keep it quiet. The client contracts? All transferred to a new company I created. The equipment? Leased, not owned. Blake will inherit a shell company with $4 million in debt and no revenue." I had to pause the video because I couldn't breathe. Dad had planned this, all of it, years in advance. I hit play again. "The new company is called Heritage Manufacturing," Dad continued. "It holds all of Hammond & Sons' actual value. The client relationships, the intellectual property, the profitable contracts, the cash reserves, and I'm leaving Heritage Manufacturing to you, Nina, 100% ownership." Tears streamed down my face. "I'm trusting you because you earned it, because you showed up every day, because you care about our workers and our legacy. Blake only cares about money and status, so I'm giving him exactly what he wants, the Hammond name, and I'm giving you what matters, the actual business." Dad smiled, sad but determined. "Mr. Anderson will contact you Monday after the will reading. He'll explain everything. There are conditions. You can't tell Blake before the reading. You can't interfere with his inheritance. Let him take Hammond & Sons. Let him think he won. Then, when he realizes what he actually got, you'll have a choice to make." He paused. "You can walk away and let him fail, or you can offer to help him. That's up to you. But know this, you don't owe him anything. You owe yourself everything." The video ended in that storage unit for 2 hours, going through every file, every document, every piece of evidence. Dad had built an ironclad case: Blake's theft, his mismanagement, his lies. And alongside that, Dad had built me a gift. A company that generated $3.2 million in annual profit, employed 73 people, and had contracts locked in for the next 5 years. All invisible to Blake. All mine. When I finally left the storage unit, it was dark outside. I locked it carefully and drove home. I didn't call Blake. I didn't call my mom. I just sat on my couch, holding that brass key, and let myself feel everything. The grief of losing Dad, the betrayal of Blake's cruelty, the shock of Dad's plan, and underneath it all, something new: power. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards, and Blake had no idea. Monday morning, I dressed carefully. Simple black suit, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back. I looked like I was going to a funeral, which, in a way, I was. Blake's funeral. He just didn't know it yet. The will reading was at Mr. Cock Anderson's law office downtown in a conference room with dark wood paneling and leather chairs. Mom arrived first, wearing a navy dress, her face calm. Blake showed up 10 minutes late with Brooke on his arm. She was wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a handbag that cost more than some people's rent. "Let's get this over with," Blake said, dropping into a chair. "I've got meetings all afternoon." Mr. Anderson, a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, opened a folder and pulled out documents. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Frank Hammond," he said formally. "I'll start with the specific bequests." He read through the small items first. Mom got the house and half the investment accounts. I got Dad's books, his watch, and a cash bequest of $50,000. Blake got the other half of the investments and $300,000 in cash. Then Mr. Anderson looked up. "And to my son, Blake Hammond, I leave Hammond and Sons Manufacturing, including all assets, properties, and liabilities associated with the business." Blake smiled, actually smiled, like he'd won the lottery. "There it is," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The family business, right where it belongs." Mr. Anderson wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his voice careful, "there are conditions. Blake must assume all company debts, honor all existing contracts, and may not sell or dissolve the company for a minimum of 2 years." Blake waved a hand dismissively. "Fine, whatever. I'm not selling. I'm expanding." Brooks squeezed his arm, beaming. Mr. Anderson looked at me. Just for a second, the briefest flicker of acknowledgement. Then he continued reading. "To my daughter Nina Hammond, I leave my personal effects not otherwise specified, my book collection, and any contents of storage unit 42 at Lakeside Storage Facility." Blake snorted. "A storage unit? What's in there, his old golf clubs?" I said nothing, just sat there, hands folded, face neutral. "Is that everything?" Blake asked, standing up. "Like I said, I've got meetings." Mr. Anderson closed the folder. "That concludes the reading of the will. Blake, you'll need to meet with the company accountant this week to review the business financials and begin the transfer process. I'll have my assistant schedule that." Blake was already halfway to the door. "Yeah, sure. Have them call me." He left with Brooke without saying goodbye to Mom or me. After they were gone, Mr. Anderson closed the conference room door. "Nina," he said quietly, "I'll need to meet with you privately this afternoon, 2:00. Can you come back?" I nodded. Mom squeezed my hand, under the table. "I'll see you tonight, sweetheart," she said, standing. "Your father would be so proud." At 2:00, I returned to Mr. Anderson's office. This time, he led me to a smaller room, more intimate, with just a desk and 2 chairs. He pulled out a different folder, much thicker than the first. "Your father was a remarkable man," he said. "What he did over the last 3 years took incredible discipline and foresight. He protected you, protected the business, and gave Blake exactly enough rope." He slid the folder across. "This is Heritage Manufacturing, LLC, incorporated 3 years ago, registered in Delaware. Your father was the sole owner until his death. As of 10 a.m. this morning, you became the sole owner." I opened the folder. Inside was an operating agreement, bank statements, client contracts, employee agreements, and financial reports. Heritage Manufacturing had $3.2 million in annual revenue, $900,000 in cash reserves, and 0 debt. The client list was familiar, every major account Hammond & Sons had ever had. "How did he do this?" I asked, flipping through the documents. "How did he move everything without Blake noticing?" Mr. Anderson smiled thinly. "Your father was meticulous. Over 2 years, he renegotiated every client contract. Instead of renewing with Hammond & Sons, he had clients sign with Heritage Manufacturing. Since you were the operations manager who handled all client relationships, they barely noticed the name change. The work continued, the quality continued, only the paperwork changed." He pulled out another document. He also transferred all intellectual property, patents, designs, manufacturing processes to Heritage. Again, quietly, legally, documented at every step. By the time he was done, Hammond & Sons was just a name and a building. All the value was here. I stared at the papers, my father's signature on page after page. "What about the factory?" "Mortgaged," Mr. Anderson said bluntly. "Your father took out a loan against the property to cover operational costs after the revenue left. Hammond & Sons currently owes $2.8 million to the bank. The building and equipment are worth maybe $1.5 million in a fire sale. Blake just inherited a company that's losing money every month with no way to fix it." I sat back, trying to process everything. So Blake gets the name and the debt. I get the actual business. "Precisely," Mr. Anderson said. "And here's the best part. Heritage Manufacturing leases the factory space and equipment from Hammond & Sons. We have a 5-year lease agreement signed 2 years ago, paying market rate rent. That rent is Hammond & Sons' only revenue. It's not enough to cover their mortgage and operating costs, but it keeps them technically solvent." I started to understand. So Blake's company needs my rent payments to survive. Exactly. And you, as owner of Heritage, can choose whether to renew that lease when it expires in 3 years. You can also choose to buy Hammond & Sons if it goes into foreclosure, or you can simply let it fail and relocate Heritage to a new facility. Mr. Anderson leaned forward. Your father didn't do this out of cruelty. He did it as a test. If Blake proves himself capable of running a business, handling debt, treating people well, then maybe he deserves a second chance. But if he continues down his current path, he'll destroy himself. Either way, you're protected. You have the business, the clients, the profit, and the control. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Blake discover the truth. First came the meeting with the Hammond & Sons accountant, where Blake learned about the debt. He called me that night, angry, but trying to hide it. Did you know about the mortgage on the factory? He demanded. No, I said honestly. Dad never discussed finances with me. You said I was just a glorified secretary, remember? He hung up without responding. Then came the discovery that most of the major clients had contracts with Heritage Manufacturing, not Hammond & Sons. Blake showed up at my apartment on a Thursday night. You stole Dad's clients, he said the moment I opened the door. I didn't steal anyone, I said calmly. I manage operations for Heritage Manufacturing. The clients choose who they work with. His face turned red. Heritage Manufacturing? What the hell is that? A company Dad started 3 years ago, I said. I'm the owner now. Check the contracts, Blake. Everything's legal and documented. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You? You own a company? I do, I said. And Heritage is currently leasing the factory space from Hammond & Sons. We're your biggest tenant. In fact, we're your only revenue source right now. Understanding dawned on Blake's face, followed quickly by panic. Wait, you're saying Dad's clients work with your company, not mine? That's correct. And you lease the factory from me? Heritage Manufacturing does, yes. We have a 5-year lease agreement, 3 years remaining. Blake's hands clenched into fists. You planned this, you and Dad. You set me up. I met his eyes. Dad documented everything, Blake. Your theft, the $400,000 you took from company accounts, the unauthorized loans, the failed side business you funded with company money. He knew exactly who you were and what you'd do. So he protected what mattered. That's not true, Blake said, but his voice shook. I never stole anything. That money was for business development. We both know that's a lie, I said quietly. Dad has 3 years of bank statements proving otherwise. I have them all in a storage unit. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to go home and actually read the financials of what you inherited. And then you're going to decide if you want to run a business or run a scam. Blake left, and I closed the door, leaning against it until my hands stopped shaking. I wasn't being cruel. I was being truthful. And the truth was, Blake had choices. He could swallow his pride, work hard, and rebuild Hammond & Sons into something sustainable. Or he could keep pretending to be a big shot until the debt buried him. 2 weeks later, Brooke showed up at my office at Heritage Manufacturing. Our office was small, just 5 rooms in a converted warehouse, but it was efficient. She found me in my office reviewing production schedules. We need to talk, she said, not bothering to knock. I looked up. About what? About saving Blake's company, she said, sitting down uninvited. He's drowning. The mortgage payments are crushing him. The clients are gone. He can't make payroll. You have to help him. I set down my pen. Why would I do that? Because he's your brother, Brooke said, like it was obvious. Because family helps family. I almost laughed. Family helps family? Where was that energy when Blake called me dead weight? When he fired me from the company I'd run for 12 years? When he threw Dad's awards in a box like garbage? Brooke's face hardened. That was business. This is different. No, I said. This is business too. Hammond & Sons is losing money because Blake mismanaged it. Heritage Manufacturing is profitable because I built relationships with clients and ran operations efficiently. Those are facts. But you have all of Dad's clients, Brooke said. That's not fair. You stole them. I didn't steal anyone, I said for the second time. Dad transferred those contracts 3 years ago, legally. The clients stayed because they trust me, not because of the company name. Brooke leaned forward. Blake will pay you. He'll cut you in on Hammond & Sons. You can be partners. I don't want to be Blake's partner, I said. I'm already running my own company. Then what do you want? Brooke asked, frustrated. I thought about Dad's video, about the choice he'd given me. I want Blake to admit what he did. I want him to acknowledge that he stole from Dad's company, that he lied, and that he treated me like garbage because he thought he could get away with it. If he can do that, honestly, without excuses, then maybe we can talk about the future. Brooke stood up, angry now. You're just being vindictive. This is revenge. No, I said calmly. Revenge would be releasing the evidence of Blake's theft to the business community. Revenge would be foreclosing on Hammond & Sons and buying it for pennies on the dollar. I'm not doing either of those things. I'm running my business and letting Blake run his. If that feels like punishment to him, maybe he should ask himself why. She left, slamming the door. That night, Mom called. Blake came to see me, she said. He's angry. Scared too, I think. Did he tell you about the debt? I asked. He did, and he told me you're refusing to help him. I sighed. That's not true. I'm refusing to bail him out. There's a difference. Mom was quiet for a moment. Your father gave you a choice, Nina. What he didn't tell you is that choice says everything about who you are, not who Blake is. You. I thought about that after we hung up. Was I being too harsh, too unforgiving, or was I finally, after 34 years, standing up for myself? I fell asleep without an answer, but I woke up knowing what I needed to do. I called Blake the next morning. Meet me at the factory, I said. Noon, just you and me. He showed up 20 minutes late, looking exhausted. We met in the empty break room where I used to eat lunch with the production workers. I've been thinking about Dad's will, I said, about what he actually wanted. Blake crossed his arms defensively. What's that supposed to mean? It means Dad didn't just give you Hammond & Sons to punish you. He gave it to you because he hoped you'd prove him wrong. He wanted you to step up, work hard, and become the man he believed you could be. I pulled out a folder. These are the financials for both companies, yours and mine. I want you to see the reality. Blake took the folder but didn't open it. I know the reality. I'm broke and you're not. You're not broke, I corrected. You're in debt. But you have assets. You have the Hammond name, which still means something in this industry. You have a factory building, you have equipment, and you have 3 years of rent revenue from Heritage guaranteed by contract. I stood up and walked to the window. Here's what I'm offering. Heritage Manufacturing will extend its lease for another 5 years at current rates. That gives you stable revenue and time to rebuild. In exchange, you work with a business consultant I'll pay for to restructure your debt and create an actual business plan. Blake looked up, suspicious. What's the catch? No catch, I said. But there are conditions. First, you publicly acknowledge that Dad transferred the client contracts to Heritage years ago, and you stop telling people I stole them. Second, you repay the $400,000 you took from Hammond & Sons over the next 10 years. Payments go into a trust that funds scholarships for children of factory workers. Third, you treat your employees with respect. I hear about anyone getting bullied or mistreated. The deal's off. Blake stared at me. You want me to admit I stole from Dad? I want you to admit you made mistakes, and you're trying to fix them, I said. That's all. No public confession, no criminal charges, just honesty between us and Mom, and a commitment to do better. He was quiet for a long time. I watched emotions cross his face, pride, shame, anger, fear. Finally, he said, Why are you doing this? Because Dad loved both of us, I said simply, and because I'm tired of fighting. You can take this offer and rebuild, or you can refuse and keep drowning. Your choice. Blake opened the folder and actually looked at the numbers. I saw him processing it all, the debt, the revenue, the timeline, the possibilities. I'll think about it, he said finally. 3 days later, Blake called and accepted the terms. We met at Mr. Anderson's office to sign the new lease agreement and establish the repayment trust. Brooke wasn't with him this time. She's mad at me, Blake said when I asked. Says I'm letting you walk all over me. Are you? I asked. He shook his head. No, I'm accepting help from someone I treated badly. There's a difference. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement, and that was a start. Over the next 6 months, Blake worked with the consultant. He refinanced the factory mortgage, cut unnecessary expenses, and even started taking on small custom manufacturing jobs to generate additional revenue. He was actually working, for the first time in years. Heritage Manufacturing continued to grow. I hired 2 more project managers, expanded our client base, and moved into a larger office. We were profitable, sustainable, and ethical. Everything Dad had wanted the business to be. One afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Dad was buried. I sat by his headstone and told him about Blake, about the business, about the choice I'd made. "I think you'd be proud," I said quietly. "Not because I won, because I gave him a chance to change. That's what you wanted, right?" Mom started joining me for dinner once a week. We'd cook together in her kitchen, and she'd tell me stories about Dad I'd never heard before. "He used to worry about you," she said one night. "Not about your competence. He knew you were brilliant. He worried that you were too kind, too willing to let Blake take advantage." "Was he right?" I asked. Mom smiled. "He was right that you're kind. But kindness isn't weakness, Nina. What you did, giving Blake structure and boundaries while still offering help, that took more strength than just walking away would have." She pulled something from her pocket. Another small envelope. "Your father left me letters, one for each major event he thought would happen after he died. This one is for you, to be opened after Blake accepted your terms." I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on Dad's letterhead. "Nina, if you're reading this, you made the choice I hoped you would. Not the easy choice, not the vengeful choice, but the right one. You gave your brother a chance to be better, and you protected yourself in the process. That's leadership. That's integrity. I'm proud of you. Not because you're running a successful company, though I am proud of that, but because you're becoming the person I always knew you could be. Strong, fair, and unafraid to stand up for yourself. The business will be fine. You'll be fine. Just remember, success isn't about how much money you make or how many people you beat. It's about building something that lasts and treating people with dignity along the way. I love you. I'm always with you. Dad." I cried reading that letter, but they were good tears, healing tears. A year after the will reading, Heritage Manufacturing had doubled in size. We employed 43 people, had contracts with 12 major clients, and had just signed a deal to manufacture components for a national retailer. Blake's company was stable, not growing quickly, but steady. He'd paid back his first installment to the Scholarship Trust and had actually apologized to several former employees he'd mistreated. One of them, a production supervisor named Otto, even agreed to come back and work for him part-time. Brooke left him. She'd wanted the money and the status, not the hard work. Blake seemed relieved, honestly. "She never actually liked me," he told me over coffee one morning. "She liked the idea of me, the successful business owner, the guy with the name and the inheritance. When that disappeared, so did she." "Do you miss her?" I asked. He shook his head. "I miss who I thought I was when I was with her. Turns out that guy was kind of awful." It was the closest Blake had come to a real apology, and I accepted it for what it was, progress. 2 years after Dad's death, I stood in the newly renovated Heritage Manufacturing headquarters. We'd bought our own building, a converted textile factory with high ceilings and lots of natural light. The employees had personalized their workspaces. There was a break room with comfortable chairs and free coffee. The production floor was organized, efficient, and safe. I'd invited Mom to the opening celebration. She walked through the building with tears in her eyes, touching the walls, meeting the employees, seeing what we'd built. "Your father would have loved this," she said. "Not just the success, the way you did it, with integrity." Blake came too, though I knew it was hard for him. He shook hands with my employees, complimented the facility, and even gave a short speech about how proud Dad would be. As everyone mingled, drinking champagne and celebrating, I found myself thinking about that brass key. The one Mom had given me 2 years ago with a mysterious laugh. That key had unlocked more than a storage unit. It had unlocked the truth about my family, about my own worth, and about what my father had really valued. Blake hadn't been given the family business as a reward. He'd been given a test, and I hadn't been given a storage unit as an afterthought. I'd been given a foundation. Everything I'd built started with that moment of discovery, with understanding that my father had seen me, valued me, and trusted me with his real legacy. It's been 5 years now since Dad died. Heritage Manufacturing employs 96 people and generates $8.4 million in annual revenue. We've won regional business awards, been featured in trade publications, and became the largest employer in our county. Blake still runs Hammond & Sons, though it's a smaller operation now. He manufactures specialty parts for 3 clients and breaks even most months. We're not close, Blake and I, but we're civil. We have dinner with Mom once a month, and we've learned to talk without fighting. He'll never be the brother I wished for as a kid, but he's trying to be a better person than he was. And that's enough. I found the letter Dad wrote to Blake tucked in the back of one of the storage unit files. I gave it to him last Christmas. He read it privately, and when he came back downstairs, his eyes were red. He believed I could change, Blake said quietly. Even after everything, he believed I could be better. He did, I agreed. Do you? Blake looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my actual brother instead of the mask he wore. I'm trying, he said. That brass key sits on my desk now, mounted on a small plaque that reads, "Truth unlocks everything, Frank Hammond." It reminds me that power isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's a single key, a quiet plan, and a father's faith that his daughter would know what to do with both. Blake took the family business, but I got something better. I got the truth, the real legacy, and the chance to build something Dad would be proud of. And in the end, that one key opened every door that mattered.